You receive the email at 3:47 inches the afternoon. The subject line contains the word, "Congratulations." Your hands shake as you open it. The visa has been approved. The promotion came through. The project you poured 6 months into has been greenlit. Your heart accelerates, but not with joy, with fear. You are sitting in a coffee shop with friends when the notification arrives. You glance at your phone, read the first line, and immediately turn the screen face down against the wooden table. Your pulse pounds in your throat. Someone asks if everything is okay. You smile and say it's nothing, just spam, just work, just something you'll deal with later. Later, alone in your apartment, you allow yourself to feel it. The relief, the pride, the strange electric sensation of having won something you were terrified to want. But even in solitude, the emotion curdles. Because already your mind is calculating. Who can you tell? Who will genuinely celebrate? Who will smile with their mouth but not their eyes? Who will suddenly remember their own struggles and feel diminished by your light? So you decide to say nothing. When your mother calls and asks how things are going, you mention the weather. When your best friend complains about their own job search, you nod sympathetically and offer advice, careful not to reveal that you've just been offered exactly what they're desperate for. When a colleague asks about your interview, you shrug and say, "You haven't heard back yet." The lie sits in your chest like a stone. This is not humility. Do not mistake it for grace. Humility is knowing your worth and choosing not to parade it. This is something else entirely. This is the weight of carrying other people's feelings as if they were your own. This is the terror that your success will become their failure, that your joy will illuminate their lack, that the moment you step into the light, you will lose the only thing that matters, the warmth of being wanted, the safety of belonging, the comfort of being just like everyone else. Why does your happiness feel like a crime you must hide in the dark? You are not broken. Let that be said first. What you carry is not weakness, but a particular kind of sensitivity that most people have trained themselves to ignore. You feel the emotional temperature of every room you enter. You sense the unspoken disappointments, the quiet envies, the fragile egos that surround you like landmines. And you have learned, perhaps without realizing it, that your brightness can detonate them. This is not humility. Understand the distinction. A humble person knows their competence and chooses discretion. They acknowledge their achievements privately and move forward without fanfare. But you experience something more corrosive. You feel guilt for succeeding. You feel fear that your fortune is somehow stolen from someone else's share of happiness. You carry what psychologists call survivor's guilt in its softest form, the irrational belief that you do not deserve good things when others suffer, that your elevation somehow causes their descent. Or perhaps it is what Abraham Maslow named the Jonah Complex, the fear not of failure but of your own greatness, the terror of what you might become if you allowed yourself to fully inhabit your success. Because once you claim it, once you announce it, you must then maintain it. You must live up to it. You must become the person who deserves those congratulations, and that person feels impossibly far from who you believe yourself to be. So you dim yourself. You edit your stories. You curate your struggles and hide your victories, because somewhere deep in your nervous system, you have learned that invisibility is safer than celebration. That sameness is safer than distinction. That struggling alongside others creates connection, while succeeding alone creates distance. This impulse comes from somewhere profound. You are someone with hyper-empathy, the ability to feel other people's emotions as if they were your own. When you imagine telling your friend about your promotion while they're unemployed, you don't just predict their reaction, you feel it. You feel the tightness in their chest, the forced smile, the way their congratulations will taste like ash in their mouth. And because you feel it so vividly, you protect them. You protect them by protecting yourself from having to witness their pain. This is a defense mechanism, elegant and invisible. You sacrifice recognition to preserve relationships. You would rather be unseen than be resented. You would rather hide your light than risk the possibility, however small, however unfair, that your brightness will make someone you love feel smaller. You have chosen connection over celebration. You have chosen the safety of the herd over the exposure of standing apart. But here is what you have not yet considered. The cost of this choice is not just your own joy. It is something far more dangerous. It is the slow erosion of authenticity itself. The roots of this silence go deeper than you know. They reach back through years, through childhood dinner tables and playground hierarchies, through evolutionary instincts older than language itself. To understand why you hide your success is to excavate layers of conditioning so ancient they feel like truth. Begin with the paradox that Abraham Maslow discovered late in his career, after he had already built his famous hierarchy of needs. He noticed something strange among his subjects. People did not just fear failure, they feared success with equal intensity. He called this the Jonah Complex, named for the biblical prophet who fled from his own calling because he was terrified of what he might become if he answered it. Maslow observed that we shrink from our own potential greatness. We sabotage ourselves at the moment of breakthrough. We hide our achievements not because we doubt them, but because we know they are real. And if they are real, then we must become the person capable of sustaining them. Success demands that you grow into someone larger than you currently are. It demands that you carry responsibility, that you meet expectations, that you never again have the luxury of being ordinary or overlooked. When you hide your visa approval, when you downplay your promotion, you are not protecting others. You are protecting yourself from the weight of your own destiny. You are choosing the comfortable smallness of what you know over the terrifying vastness of what you might become. Because if you announce your success, you can never again claim ignorance. You can never again hide behind self-doubt. You must step forward and carry the treasure you have found and spend the rest of your life guarding it. It is like discovering a chest of gold buried in your backyard and immediately burying it deeper, because owning it would mean becoming someone who must protect wealth, who must make decisions about wealth, who must live as someone wealthy. The treasure itself becomes a burden too heavy to claim. But there is another force at work, one even older than individual psychology. It comes from the deep evolutionary memory of what happens to those who rise too high. In botany, there is a phenomenon observed in poppy fields. When one flower grows taller than the others, it is the first to be cut down. Gardeners and farmers learn this instinctively. The tall poppy must be removed to maintain the uniformity of the field. Human societies learn the same lesson. Anthropologists call it the tall poppy syndrome, and it appears in every culture that values collective harmony over individual achievement. In ancient communities and tribal structures, in any group where survival depended on cooperation, the person who stood out became dangerous. They disrupted the balance. They threatened the equality that kept the group stable. And so they were cut down through gossip, through exile, through the withdrawal of affection and belonging. You carry this memory in your bones. When you succeed, some ancient part of your brain registers threat. It whispers that visibility equals vulnerability. That distinction equals danger. That if you rise above the field, you will be the first to be cut. This is why success feels like exposure. Why achievement feels like painting a target on your back. In some cultures, this fear has a name and a face. They call it the evil eye, the belief that someone else's envy can curse you, that their jealous gaze can bring misfortune. It sounds like superstition, but it reveals a psychological truth. You fear not just the loss of relationships, but something more primal. You fear that other people's resentment has power, that their silent judgment can somehow undo what you have built. So you hide to stay safe. You hide to avoid the gaze. And there is a practical dimension to this fear that makes it worse. When you succeed, the power dynamic in your relationships shifts. You are no longer on equal footing with your friends who are struggling. You have something they want. You have proof that certain dreams are achievable, which means their continued failure becomes harder to excuse. Your presence becomes a mirror that reflects their stagnation, and mirrors are easy to resent. So you perform a kind of emotional theater. You maintain the false equilibrium. You pretend you are still where they are, still struggling with the same problems, still uncertain about the same outcomes. You hide your salary increase and complain about the same bills. You hide your acceptance letter and commiserate about the same rejections. You keep yourself small so the relationship can stay familiar, so no one has to confront the uncomfortable truth that you have moved forward and they have not. But the deepest roots of this pattern were planted long before you understood what they meant. They were planted in childhood, in the family system that taught you what was safe and what was dangerous. Perhaps you grew up with a parent who could not tolerate being outshone, a father whose fragile ego required that he remain the smartest person in the room, a mother whose own unfulfilled dreams made your achievements feel like accusations. When you brought home a good grade, the response was not celebration, but minimization. Don't get too proud. It was probably an easy test. Your sister never bragged like this. You learned that your light threatened theirs. That shining meant being pushed back into shadow. Or perhaps you grew up in a family with a sibling who struggled, a brother with a disability, a sister with depression, a younger child who needed constant attention, and you, the capable one, the healthy one, were taught that your role was to not make waves, to not need too much, to celebrate quietly, if at all, because your joy would only highlight their pain. You learned to feel guilty for having what they lacked. You learned that love was conditional on your willingness to stay small enough not to overshadow the one who was suffering. Or perhaps the message was even simpler. Perhaps you learned that affection was only given when you were struggling, when you needed help, when you were humble and dependent. When you succeeded, the warmth withdrew. Your parents became distant, as if competence made you less lovable. You learned that vulnerability creates connection, and strength creates isolation. So, you manufactured struggles, you hid victories, you performed need because need was the only currency that bought you love. These patterns embedded themselves in your nervous system before you had language to name them. They became the lens through which you interpret every success. And now, decades later, when you receive good news, your body responds not with joy but with the old familiar fear. The fear of being too much, the fear of being resented, the fear of being left alone on the summit while everyone you love remains in the valley below. And beneath all of this, beneath the evolutionary instinct and the childhood wounds, there is one more trap, the cruelest one. The voice that whispers you do not deserve this success at all, that it was luck, that it was a mistake, that you are a fraud who will be discovered the moment you claim what you have earned. Psychologists call this imposter syndrome, but that clinical term does not capture the visceral terror of it. It is the feeling that your achievements are not truly yours, that you stumbled into them, that you fooled everyone into believing you were competent, and if you announce your success, people will look closer. They will examine your work, they will ask questions, and they will discover that you are not actually qualified, not actually talented, not actually deserving of what you have received. So silence becomes camouflage. If you do not claim the success, no one will scrutinize it. If you do not celebrate the promotion, no one will wonder if you earned it. You hide the evidence of your achievement the way a criminal hides evidence of a crime, because deep down, some part of you believes that succeeding was a transgression, that you got away with something you should not have. That visibility will bring investigation, and investigation will bring exposure, and exposure will bring the shame of being revealed as less than you pretended to be. This is the architecture of your silence. Layer upon layer of fear, conditioning, and self-protection built so carefully over so many years that it feels like truth. It feels like wisdom. It feels like the only way to survive in a world where success is dangerous and authenticity is a luxury you cannot afford. But what if everything you believe about this is wrong? Consider the possibility that your silence is not protecting your relationships. Consider that it is slowly poisoning them. Every time you hide a victory, you create distance. Not the distance you fear, the distance of envy or resentment, but something more insidious, the distance of inauthenticity. When you edit your life into a version you think others can tolerate, you are not giving them the truth of who you are. You are giving them a performance, a carefully curated story designed to make them comfortable, to keep them close, to avoid triggering whatever pain you imagine they carry. But people sense this. They may not name it. They may not even consciously recognize it. But on some level, they feel the withholding. They feel the gap between what you present and what you conceal. And that gap, that invisible wall you build to protect them, becomes the very thing that keeps them at a distance. You think you are preserving intimacy by hiding your joy. In truth, you are guaranteeing its erosion. Because real connection cannot exist without vulnerability. And vulnerability means showing all of yourself, not just the parts that are safe, not just the struggles that invite sympathy, but the fullness of your experience. The triumphs and the failures. The grief and the celebration. When you only share your pain, you are only offering half of who you are. And a relationship built on half-truths, no matter how well-intentioned, cannot bear the weight of genuine intimacy. Your friends do not need your protection. They need your honesty. They need to know that you trust them enough to show them your whole life, to believe that they are capable of feeling joy for you even when their own life is difficult. When you hide your success, you are making a quiet accusation. You are saying without words that you do not believe they are generous enough, mature enough, secure enough to celebrate with you. You are infantilizing them, treating them as fragile creatures who must be shielded from the reality of your happiness. And what about envy? What about the very real possibility that someone will feel jealous, diminished, resentful of what you have achieved? Here is the truth you must learn. To hold their envy is not your responsibility. Envy is a projection. It is a screen onto which people cast their own unfulfilled desires, their own sense of lack, their own fear that they are running out of time. When someone feels jealous of your success, they are not seeing you. They are seeing a mirror of their own disappointment. And while you can have compassion for that pain, you cannot fix it by making yourself smaller. You are not responsible for managing the inner landscape of other people's minds. You are not responsible for dimming your light so that their darkness feels less dark. You cannot heal their wounds by inflicting wounds upon yourself. This is not generosity. This is self-abandonment disguised as kindness. And yes, some people will fall away. Some relationships will not survive your growth. When you stop performing struggle, when you stop pretending to be stuck in the same place they are, some people will withdraw. They will become cold. They will make small comments, subtle digs, quiet expressions of disappointment that you have changed, that you are different now, that you are not who you used to be. Let them go. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. A friendship that requires you to stay small in order to survive is not a friendship. It is a transaction. You provide the comfort of sameness, and they provide the illusion of belonging. But belonging that depends on your diminishment is not belonging at all. It is a cage painted to look like home. The people who truly love you will not need you to hide. They will not need you to shrink. They will celebrate your success as if it were their own, because they understand that your joy does not subtract from theirs. They understand that there is no scarcity of achievement, no limited pool of happiness that must be rationed carefully. They know that your rising lifts everyone around you, that your proof of possibility gives them permission to reach for their own. And here is the hidden gift in all of this. The sensitivity that makes you hide your success reveals something beautiful about who you are. You value connection more than status. You value relationships more than recognition. This is rare. This is precious. The problem is not the sensitivity itself. The problem is where you have placed it in the service of fear rather than truth. The work of unlearning this silence does not happen all at once. It cannot. You have spent years, perhaps decades, building these defenses. They will not dissolve because you read the right words or understand the right concepts. Healing happens slowly in small acts of courage that feel like falling even as they teach you to stand. Begin with one person. Not your entire social media network, not your extended family, not the group chat where everyone performs their best lives and worst anxieties in equal measure. Find one person who you know in your bones will receive your news with genuine joy. A friend who has celebrated you before. A mentor who has watched you grow. A sibling who has never needed you to be less than you are in order to love you. Tell them. Tell them in private, in a quiet moment, in a way that feels safe and contained. Say the words you have been holding. I got the job. I finished the project. Something good happened, and I want to share it with you. Watch what happens in your body when you speak this truth. Notice if your throat tightens. Notice if your hands shake. Notice if some part of you wants to immediately follow the announcement with an apology, a disclaimer, a reassurance that you know you do not really deserve it. Do not apologize. Let the words stand alone. Let your nervous system learn that speaking your success does not cause the world to end, that vulnerability does not equal destruction, that you can be seen in your joy and still be loved. This is practice. This is how you teach your body a new truth, one small interaction at a time. Then learn to redefine what humility actually means. C.S. Lewis wrote that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. The distinction is everything. True humility is not self-deprecation. It is not pretending you are less capable than you are. It is recognizing that your worth is not the central axis around which the universe turns. It is understanding that you can acknowledge your achievements without making them the only thing that matters. You can share your success with gratitude instead of arrogance. You can say, I worked hard for this, and I also got lucky, and I am grateful it came together. You can honor both your effort and the forces beyond your control that align to create this outcome. This is not boasting. This is honesty. This is giving yourself permission to occupy the fullness of your experience without inflating it or erasing it. And then comes the hardest part. You must accept that some people will leave. Some relationships will not survive your willingness to be fully seen. When you stop hiding, when you stop performing sameness, certain friendships will reveal themselves as conditional, built not on mutual respect, but on mutual stagnation, built not on genuine affection, but on the comfort of shared complaint. There will be people who go quiet when you share good news, who change the subject, who find reasons to be busy, to create distance, to slowly drift away without explanation. This will hurt. Do not pretend it will not, but understand what it means. It means they needed you to stay small in order to feel big. It means they needed your struggle in order to justify their own. It means the friendship was never about you at all, but about what you could provide for their ego. Let them go, not with bitterness, but with clarity. These people are not your enemies. They are simply not your companions for the next part of your journey. The path forward requires that you walk with people who can celebrate your light without feeling threatened by it, who can witness your growth without feeling diminished, who understand that your success is not their failure, that there is enough room in this world for everyone to rise. Before you share with anyone, celebrate alone. Cook yourself a good meal, buy yourself flowers, take yourself to dinner. Sit with your accomplishment in private and let yourself feel the fullness of it without editing, without shrinking, without immediately pivoting to what comes next. Fill your own cup first, then share from the overflow. There is a lighthouse that stands on the northern coast of a country you may never visit. It has been there for over a century, built on a cliff above rocks that have claimed countless ships. Every night, without exception, it sends its beam across the dark water. The light is bright, impossibly bright. It cuts through fog and rain and the deepest hours of night when the world feels most alone. The lighthouse does not apologize for its brightness. It does not dim itself because the darkness is comfortable. It does not worry that its light will make the stars feel inadequate or the moon feel diminished. It understands something essential. Its purpose is not to blend in, but to stand out. Not for vanity, not for recognition, but because ships are depending on it. Because people lost in the dark need to know where the safe harbor lies. Your success is a lighthouse, not a weapon, not a declaration of superiority, not a statement that you are better than anyone else. It is simply proof that the thing you attempted is possible, that the path you walked can be walked, that the dream you chased can be caught. When you hide your light, you are not protecting anyone. You are depriving them of navigation. You are keeping the ships in the dark when they are searching desperately for the shore. Every person who sees you succeed and feels inspired rather than diminished is someone who needed your light to find their own way forward. Every person who celebrates with you is learning that joy is not scarce, that there is enough room for everyone to rise. You do not need to shrink to fit inside other people's small expectations. You do not need to perform struggle to earn love. You do not need to hide your victories to prove you are still one of them. You can be both humble and radiant. You can be both grateful and unapologetic. You can honor your success without making it your identity, can share your joy without demanding admiration. The world does not need more people hiding in the dark out of fear. The world needs people who are willing to stand on the cliff and let their light shine, even when their hands shake, even when the darkness feels safer, even when being seen feels like the most terrifying thing they have ever done. Be the lighthouse. The ships are coming. They need you to burn bright.